Hey everybody, this is Rydo, and we're back to another live stream of Shadowverse. Today is Wednesday, December 2nd, and we will have to wait to see if the buffer runs into any trouble today. We had great streaming on Monday with my router settings being reverted to older settings, so I'm hoping that still works the same way today, perhaps with less um, preemptive attempts at making sure that happens by shutting down other servers that my server is working with. Like, like for the accountability section today, I did finish a story about my uncle in the sense that I got to the last level and probably very close to the end of the last level and just rage quit it. I did go afterwards and watch a another YouTuber play it towards the end. It did seem like uh, the two other video YouTubers I saw that played it also were having a lot of frustrating experiences uh, as far as the flinging goat simulator style mechanic, which A Story by My Uncle is the game that the developers of Goat Simulator made. So it's no surprising that it has the same flinging, terrible physics mechanic. Um, there's kind of no story there. Like um, one one person actually made it to the end, and see, the thing about A Story About My Uncle is you literally only see the uncle at that very end of the cutscene, and then he says basically, you have to leave this magical world you've been transversing to find me and go back home. I'm staying here. It seems like there might be an understory that the whole story was a made up analogy for the nephew dealing with the death of his uncle, and that each of the levels is supposed to represent a stage of grief, which, yeah, I don't think that really works at all, because like the first stage doesn't really represent denial, and the second stage doesn't really represent anger, and there's no like acceptance stage or anything like that. Something like Agony, some horror game where there was a different level that was very thematically built around that, would make a lot more sense than just uh, trying to say that that's the case. And they put in a like coded cis language, so they're trying to convince you to go back and with play the game a second time. They also wanted you to speed run it, so they put in a time trial mode, and like I didn't even finish it the first time. It's like there's really just not a fun gameplay experience there. There's far too few checkpoints, far too easy to fall to your death, far too many scenarios that have not been tested in a way that to ensure you're not running into a scenario where the game is just kicking you in the balls and laughing at you, because that's really all it felt like. Is that it's just gut punching you every time you fail, and it's like, ha ha ha, that's your fault, ha ha ha, we made this game too difficult. And yeah, I'm definitely not getting better at games, but I'm also still not to the point where I think I just absolutely suck at uh, games. I think the flinging mechanic, the bionic commando rearmed type flinging mechanic, just does not work well in any game ever. Like, because there is just too much of a frustrating experience when you fall, and too much checkpointing. Um, I think your best scenario to fix something like that is probably to have a ground in a game like that, and when you land in the ground, have something that doesn't kill you instantly, but costs you time or costs you a little bit of health. If there are, for instance, just enemies on the ground that will attack you, or enemies with guns that will shoot you if you get too low, but you can actually muddle through that and it just feels awkward, that would be my ideal scenario. Here we're going to play fairies again. It's just going to be very fairies heavy until we can get these daily quests, which are, let's face it, not really daily quests in my case. The whole story of A Story About My Uncle, you find these frog people. They really play no role in the story at all, other than the thought that the uncle very well accidentally created them and then is now taking care of them like his children, and that in one of the frog persons is kind of like is even more like his child, which maybe is an analogy that the uncle had some like out of wedlock child that he was deciding to take care of after a while. But there's really no character development about the uncle at all. You just see it from this perspective of, there's a few areas where you'll get conversations at the beginning of the game talking about them if you find those areas, but I probably missed a ton of them. I totally missed a ton of collectibles. So the average player playing a game like that is not going to get a full story, and more than likely they're not going to finish the game because it's not worth it. There's a point, particularly at the end too, where you break the rocket boots that you get about halfway through the game, which I knew was way too early to get rocket boots, and the rocket boots don't really even help that much. They are a one-time correction if you really blow a swing, but later on they introduce these crystals that refill the number of swings you can do, because up until that point it had been a max of 3 swings, and then they start throwing these crystals and saying, oh, actually you have to swing once, maybe twice, then you have to use the third energy whip to hit the crystal to recharge, then you do another 1 or 2 shots. The game, because you're swinging with the trigger, it's particularly easy to accidentally over swing and use one of the energy whips. There's a point where blocks are just randomly falling, and it's been at least 30 minutes trying to get through a straight shot where blocks would randomly fall, and you had to 2 or 3 times find a block that you could pull yourself down to, put your foot on the ground to recharge your energy whips, so that you could then rocket boost back upward, because the blocks are falling and you only have so much time. So 3 times in a row you have to get just really like you just have to get super lucky 3 times. And I should have rage quit at that point, but I actually made it to 2 or 3 more sections past that point, and then they started introducing the concept of swinging on stalactites, some of which would fall, some of which wouldn't, which makes a scenario where you would only be able to do it correctly if you had memorized where all the stalactites are. And there's a brief section where you swing on the roof of a cave, which was particularly too brief. So yeah, that happened far too short. That is another issue, certainly, about a story about my uncle, is that you are flinging yourself on floating rocks. You're not flinging yourself on just a big flat roof cave, which would have been fairly easier to do that, at least at the beginning of the game. Like, the first level could easily have been you were in a cave, you were flinging yourself on the roof of the cave, there was occasionally gaps, and so you had to get enough momentum, which the game very poorly implements the physics on the momentum. You're more pulling yourself forward and then bonking your head on the floating rocks than you are having a whip, Indiana Jones whip-like experience where you have a forward momentum velocity and a falling downward momentum velocity that is being fought against the strength of the whip. So, like, it just doesn't feel the way I think it should have felt. And as much as I might like Indiana Jones, I don't think there's a full game where you just swing on the whip. That, even in the movie, that was something he did once or twice in the 3 movies, not all the time. I mean, really, that's just ripping off a Tarzan game at a certain point, which I doubt a Tarzan game would ever actually have sell. So I did that relatively recently. This morning, last night. Before then, I wasted a lot of time trying to set up a Windows program that would actually work to back up to my server. I was trying a thing called changeroot, chroot, which is a built-in function that gets used by a lot of low-level Linux things to basically change all the things that a Linux user and a Linux operating system is. Inherently, when you are booting a computer, you're more a Linux install, you're more than likely starting with a very small, low-level operating system root file system, and then it change roots into a higher level operating system that has a lot more commands and does that. So what you can do through the remote connection technology, which is the de facto standard in Linux, SSH, Secure Socket Shell, I believe, which would be SSS, I guess, or probably just called Secure Shell or something like that. But the de facto standard there lets you make a change root jail, is what they call it, where a user can only do the commands that you want it to do. And since I wanted it just to have the backup software, which is called rsync, like remote sync, I wanted it just to run that and nothing else, and try and keep everything as sandboxed and secure as possible. And I'm trying to find a Windows software that will talk with Linux software, because there literally is just not a great backup solution for Windows at the moment. Like, file history doesn't really work unless you want to set up a Samba file share, and even that doesn't really want to work. Microsoft desperately wants you to back up your documents and only your documents to OneDrive. That's the long and the short of it. If you're not willing to play along with their dumb OneDrive system that they have completely abandoned, the Windows 7, Windows 8 backup software, they've pretty much abandoned the Windows 10 file history backup software, except for if it works with OneDrive. There's a theory that you could use a program called Duplicati to back up your files to a web dev server such as Nextcloud, but Duplicati just doesn't work. It just doesn't. I've never been able to get it to work. I've tried more than my fair share. It runs into problems. It crashes things. Inherently, it also backs everything up as chunks of zip files, which then stops any high chance of success for deduplication, which if you're going to try and back up your entire Windows install, and you're going to have multiple people potentially backing up their entire Windows install, a significant amount of those files would be duplicate files, and so you would ideally want to see them not redundantly copied onto a server's hard drive, wasting space. So yeah, I was trying to set up rsync through a SSH jail. I was having a lot of trouble getting the elliptical curve private key fingerprint, which is the public key part, to work with it. At one point, I accidentally deleted a very, very important low-level library file from my computer, and my computer literally could not shut down, could not run any commands at all, because I just totally broke the born again shell. And that's all the basic commands that every other command is going to rely on to work. Surprising it let me do that, frankly, but it's also surprising it wouldn't have automatically kind of fixed it, but it didn't. So excuse me, sorry. So to fix that, I had to boot into the installer USB of CentOS and then just mount the hard drive and copy the file that I had moved and renamed back to what it was supposed to be. And after that, because it's a security enhanced Linux, then I had to reboot it and let it scan and relabel the security labels, which honestly for one file didn't actually take that long, but it says it could take a very long time, but it also doesn't automatically reboot, apparently. One of the problems is I have this computer plugged into a TV that's got a lot of overscan happening, so anywhere where the cursor is where you would be typing is actually not showing up on the screen, so I'm having to type blind. I can see the line I just typed, but the line below that is cut off, and the line the columns on the left and right are a bit cut off. But yeah, I tried that and it didn't really work, and it was outside of my main goal of trying to use Docker to sandbox everything. And inherently a lot of it, the reason it doesn't work is simply because the software on the Windows side is fairly non-existent and not helpful. Because I pretty much probably could have gotten it to work if I was willing to simply make a batch file and run a Windows command, which Windows 10 does have rsync client and SSH clients just built in, or you can install them under its features option fine. More and more Windows is trying to be compatible and basically just become Linux with the caveat that it'll always be Windows first. inherently, I think they just always are going to feel the need to try and be the replacement to Linux as much as they possibly can be. But yeah, that probably would have worked, but it just didn't work. So not with a reasonable user experience. So instead, I'm going to just use a different software. I'm going to try to use a different software to not use rsync, which kind of sucks because rsync is going to be faster and better. But instead, it's just going to use the SSH default FTP, which inherently rsync also used the SSH default FTP, but used it on top of it. So it's just going to FTP the files, and I'm going to try and set up a FTP server that would that'll be done through Docker, and that way we're back to using Docker. SSH is enabled by default just for maintenance purposes outside of Docker on my server, and there are a few things that I did install that were outside of Docker, but honestly, it would have been potentially reasonable to have installed a few more things in Docker and try to keep as much in Docker, if not everything in Docker. But there are some things, like the antivirus software kind of needs to be installed both in Docker and outside of Docker, because that just makes sense. The system logs inherently will be installed outside of Docker and inside of Docker. Remote management so that you can work on Docker like SSH makes sense. But I imagine I'm going to end up having somewhere around 80 or 90% of everything that's running through the Docker files, and only the Docker files. When I get the SFTP, the Secure File Transfer Protocol servers, up and going, I'm going to try and use a outside of Docker file system that will automatically scan it for files for viruses on file access, which should be fine, but could also corrupt data, certainly, if there is something that gets misidentified as a virus. And I haven't looked at the configuration file to say what the default response there is. It could be a default response of just emailing me versus deleting the files automatically. I also need to I switched gears and did not get as far as confirming that I had the network UPS battery backup server working and communicating with each other, which theoretically that should have worked and been easier to set up, but yeah, that's the way it kind of happens, is that things just get more complicated. I did it! I won! I was thinking I might install Time Machine for Apple Backup. I don't think that's in my workflow necessary, since I don't have any Apple products, and I'm not really anticipating anybody having Apple products anytime soon. So while that would be an interesting side project, that is more and more of a back burner side project as far as what I'm trying to get running. And I have definitely other things. One of the things that complicated the battery backup software is that there is the battery backup software is called NUT, as in Network UPS Tools, and then there is a side project called WebNut that will give you a little web page server to tell you if your battery backups are working. Theoretically, you could also equip this to follow several battery backups and monitor that, which most people would never have more than one. And since this whole idea is to get as many servers that are useful installed, WebNut is particularly a interesting idea, and that's where I started to hit the stumbling block, though, is because it wasn't installing and running well. And a lot of that comes down to there's a lot of different Docker images people have made, and it's fairly consistent that unless you are going to try and make your own Docker image, you are going to go and find some other one, and half the time you might find something that is 5-10 years old, and maybe the 5 and 10 year old one is perfect. Maybe you don't really have to update Linux, particularly Alpine based Linux images, which are super small, and even if they did have vulnerabilities, might not really matter that much. Or it could also be a case that it's just that Docker is not as supported as people probably should support it. I imagine there's a lot of competing ideas there. I imagine there's a lot of people that use just VMware and run virtual machines, which would be the other way to do something like that in Sandbox. That probably is the much more industry standard way of doing things, particularly if you're trying to run images of like Windows on a Linux setup compared to running just specific Linux applications on a Linux server. See if we can turn things around here. There we go. But yeah, I still have 3 or 4 servers I want to work on. I'm also being distracted by other things, certainly life things that, you know, life sucks for everybody. Particularly right now, life is on the cusp of really sucking for me. So, like, there's some slight concern there. Strike. At the end of your turn, deal 4 damage to all enemies and allies. So that's every time he attacks. I have not understood how this card works up until this point. I desperately need to schedule videos. I also want to get back into playing a game of some sort. So far, by the way, we have dropped 0 frames, so we're going good. But yeah, I feel like, in particular with a story about my uncle that took me a week extra, it feels like, to play, and I would like to get back into the gameplay mode. I did upload a few videos, but there's plenty of other videos that could be uploaded. But at a certain point, it also gets fairly crazy to continuously upload videos if you're not going to schedule them. So I have to address that also.
For the town's prosperity.
There we go.
Let's play.
For the town's prosperity.
Let's see. Ah, I see how this works now. Play this guy.
Home sweet home.
Well, we do have a decent amount of video game news, so we should talk about it. And then we should call it a day. Monday was a bit of a unique point, which we actually ran out of news, and I struggled to figure out a way of, as far as what to do, which I in hindsight probably should have just called it a day and not done anything, taken a little bit of a break.
Let's all calm down.
I would want to mention learning how to set up a CH root, change root jail is helpful in the sense that having a home lab and learning anything IT teaches you something. You're learning no matter what, and in a lot of cases that might be you're just learning that you can do something and that you have done something. In my case, a lot of times that means forgetting all the very specific details and just saying, well, I googled the walkthrough or tutorial to do this, and I followed the tutorial and it actually worked, so I know it actually does work at least at that point, and that I can actually do this, so if I need to come back and do it, I could.
Time for me to prove myself.
So
Let's get this party
I'm not super opposed to that. One of the problems with setting up a change root jail, though, is that it requires you to create a user, and creating a user, then if you're going to have a lot of users on a backup, you're going to get a lot of users listed in your login screen, which you might not want. There's a way to disable that fairly easily, but it is just kind of silly that you can't create a user and say, this is a remote user only, in the single command of saying it's a remote user. You can say it's a lockdown user that you can't actually log into, which that doesn't particularly help much. Locking down the default root login might be useful, but it also opens up a lot of room for dangerous mistakes to be made. Okay, so it's not particularly video game related much, but the actor formerly known as Ellen Page has come out as transgender and is now going by Elliot Page. I believe the last name's still Page. He now, or she then, was playing a character on the Umbrella Academy, and I definitely recall in the second season of watching Umbrella Academy, not really feeling like her character was interacting with or sharing screen space with any of the other characters. I thought at the time that might be an indication of him not getting along with the other actors. That very well might be the case still, but it might also have been that throughout that entire process that would have been in which season 2 was being recorded, Elliot could have been struggling with this transition. Why we're talking about this at all for video game news is that Ellen Page at the time, and see, this is inherently going to be the crux of my issue, certainly as a video game critic, is my challenge. Ellen Page at the time was the face model slash voice actor of several of the Quantic Dream games. And so there is this there is that connection. Of course, then much more recently, since she has been in any games, I think Ellen Page was in the Quantic Dream games. There definitely was a game that Ellen Page was in, and then another game that made a character that looked a lot like her, which later court cases said was that you can't sue for like copyright infringement if you don't name the person, if a character in a video game happens to look exactly like a person or is even photo traced, that still won't stand up. Later court cases proved with the GTA case.
Thus the world begins. The world cycles on.
Interesting. Why did the strike not activate? I was hoping that the strike would have activated and done 4 damage to that character. So yeah, that's the video game connection, is that Ellen Page was in a couple of games. Maybe The Last of Us? I don't think so, though. I think that's a different actress. And Elliot Page now is the new name. And then inherently this gets into the question, as a video game critic, do I now have to tiptoe, and arguably with SJWs and trying to cancel everybody, the answer is yes. I have to potentially tiptoe around referring to Elliot only as Elliot, I believe, always, like even in the previous instance. But I've definitely heard also from actual transgendered people that they say no to that concept, that actually it's more of a, they do want the older representations in older instances to be referred to by the quote-unquote dead name. And like, how far is dead naming really dead naming at a certain point? Dead naming, almost certainly, I will agree, is if you're calling Elliot Page by the former name of in the same directly to their face. But if you're referring to Ellen Page when Ellen Page was Ellen Page, then is that dead naming in most transgendered people's minds? Because if I was to say the Wachowski brothers made Matrix 1, I think I'm completely accurate there, and I don't think that anybody should take offense on that. Even totally knowing that the Wachowski brothers, one then transitioned to being female, and then they were the Wachowski siblings for a long time. I'm not sure if that happened before or after the production, the wrapping of production of Matrix 3. And then the other transitioned, so now they are the Wachowski sisters, last I heard. But yeah, I don't know if you really would run into that much either, particularly as a video game critic. I think I can just, and this is a sad picture that SJWs have painted, and this isn't inherently the issue with cancel culture in general, is that if you can't discuss someone, particularly a celebrity whose job it is to in part be discussed, if you can't discuss someone for fear of offending someone who is perpetually and intentionally offended, then people are just going to stop discussing them. So as a video game critic, if I was to go and play the Quantic Dream games with Ellen Page, or whatever other games Ellen Page is in, I probably would just spend extra effort to never mention her at all. And just talk about the character, which is the case for most of any other video game also, is that like I very rarely have need to talk about a voice actor in a character. The last time I feel like I even needed to talk about a voice actor or a character being represented in a game was the Game of Thrones Telltale game, which had, I believe, Tyrion Lannister, the shorter, the character of short stature. Let's not cause more offense by saying dwarf. I think the actor is a dwarf, but well, I said it anyway, so forget that idea. But yeah, the last time we had to discuss that was that character, and we had to discuss that character because he's just not a good voice actor. He was also like the character in Destiny originally, and they took his voice acting out and redid the whole experience. And for a brief moment there, we were having experiences where actors were taking roles away from voice actors and doing a very bad job for video games. I think they've pretty much stopped that. Even the face capture stuff really does not require voice famous actors. I think also inherently people need to admit that there is a lack of new blood being allowed to succeed in Hollywood. So getting someone like Tom Cruise, who's particularly old, and a lot of these actors who are getting digitally de-aged and touched up for their movie performances, makes it just a lot more difficult to have a game where you're going to scan the face of somebody and show potentially every single freckle and every single bag under an eye. So yeah, again, that also probably is a indication that there's not a ton of new news. Otherwise, the Giant Bombcast came out particularly late yesterday. It felt like it came out particularly late, at least, and once again they have nothing to say. I did have a thought there. I talk about Giant Bomb a lot. I've failed miserably to stop listening to the podcast, although I really am severely I'm severely less interested than I used to be in the podcast. But talking about Giant Bomb potentially could have been the end of my YouTube channel at that point. It may very well have shadow banned me every time I said the word Giant Bomb. Those words that may have triggered something in YouTube's algorithm. So a bit of suggestion to any other streamers out there: don't talk about Giant Bomb. Don't ever mention the name.
The world cycles on.
I don't see particularly any other video game streamers really succeeding on YouTube either, but better safe than sorry, I would say. I would say that also for just like any game in general. Don't talk about the guns. I imagine there probably could be a fairly good example of somebody who is like a very big gun fan who talks about all the guns in video games while he's playing them and gets considerably less views and gets shadow banned because he's talking and mentioning gun names, which we definitely have seen. I've definitely seen streamers that have said that even saying the word gun also potentially de-advertises your videos, and that they're using coded language to, if they do have to say it, calling them like pew pews or something like that. Yeah, and that totally makes sense, really, because it's completely obvious that the YouTube monetization algorithm has no nuance or understanding of what's being discussed or what's going on.
Blow on, dear wind.
Yep, lost. Moving on, we have a game here on Steam called Brain Meltdown into Despair, where you control both characters at the same time. Now, it's labeled kind of in here, Into Despair. That's a pretty downer name for a game that looks like it's a platformer. It is tagged as difficult, and you are controlling both characters at the same time, the video said. This is a particularly artsy depiction. This is early access, $7.99, English, Chinese, Korean. But yeah, a frustration platformer is not my cup of tea, but I could see people at least being interested in that. That doesn't feel like it's just a terrible low effort game. Alright, another arena run, another lack of progress. I want to open all of these tickets as we get them, just in case we lose the expansion. But I am fairly unenthusiastic with this current expansion. And I guess that is in part the truth of a lot of collectible card games, is that every expansion tries to hype itself up to make it feel like it's really, really important, and then at the end of the day it actually doesn't feel important at all. And it's actually fairly dull. I think Magic the Gathering in particular was bad about that. I would say the art is slightly more interesting in Shadowverse, but the mechanics are kind of less interesting than Magic expansions, because Magic expansions tend to have a little bit more thematic cards towards whatever new keyword they're playing with. But then there's just a lot of extra reprints, and the land issue alone makes Magic less interesting. Moving on, we have a Gamatsu article here. Doraemon Nobita's Little Star Wars 2021 game announced for the Switch, which it looks like, yeah, Doraemon is doing a space game. Doraemon, kind of beloved Japanese cartoon by Western standards. You would call a cartoon more than an anime. In Japan, they call all animation anime. Never got translated in a funny way. Next we have a Gematsu article. Momotaru Dentetsu Showa Heisei Rawa Mo Taiben. Sales have topped 750,000. I believe this is the railway game. But I could be wrong about this. This could be like a Mario Party game. But for a Japanese only game to sell over 750,000 units is a depiction of success that you probably wouldn't have expected for a game like that. Probably nobody would have expected anything from a game like that outside of Japan because they wouldn't recognize the name. And that certainly does stink when you think that there could be dozens, if not hundreds, of games around the world that you just can't engage in and engage with if you wish to. I suppose the same might be true for books and other forms of entertainment, but yeah. Since my specialty is video games, that does really stink. That definitely also goes to show like why I like to watch a lot of the Netflix translated foreign movies, Korean movies, Spanish movies. That is really nice. If I had the capacity to learn other languages and the time and probably I'd need the tutoring to learn other languages, it would have been very nice to have something that would have allowed me to speak most, if not all, languages. But yeah, that's way easier said than done. Next we have a game on Steam here called The Life and Suffering of Sora Bronte, chapters 1 and 2. They're calling this a narrative-driven RPG, choose your own adventure. It does have a unique art style. It does also seem to be fairly dark. This is from a publisher 101 XP, but you have quite the trailer here for what is just a text thing. It's just a lot of scenarios here where this character seems to be in bad chances, bad situations. This is chapters 1 and 2, so that basically means it's early access, and then it's a demo. This is English and Russian. There might be something to this, but I also wouldn't be surprised if it kind of is just too much of a downer to maintain my interest. All right.
The stars pale beside me.
Okay, evolve.
It won't be long now. My beauty will intoxify you.
There we go. This has been wasted. Tech Raptor has an article here. King of Seas is treading water, which
What I didn't want.
I know there were several pirate games that came out over the past year or two, and this does not feel like one I even ever heard about. Looking at the graphics and looking at it, it does seem like it probably isn't that. Doesn't look like it's that interesting. King of Seas doesn't have, other than graphics, King of Seas doesn't have much to offer in its current state. The storyline is nothing special. The graphics are decent. What's interesting here is this is a game where they the code was provided by the developer, and you're seeing that they're actually giving a bad review to it, which kind of inherently you don't see a lot of that happen in video games, because game reviewers tend to be so cronyistic and so unwilling to potentially offend people that they will always try to write a positive sounding review even for a negative game. I would feel like a Sea of Thieves article could say a lot of the same thing, or at least the title could say the same thing. I would say Microsoft Sea of Thieves is probably treading water as much as anything else. Because I just don't think there's a real audience there, even though I've heard a lot of video game journalists talk about it. Let's see, next we have a game on Steam here called Art of Defense, which looks a little bit too much like a mobile game for my taste. Looks like it's a tower defense game with some upgrade paths to upgrade things. Which, speaking of tower defense game, yeah, it is a mobile game. I suppose I can't blame somebody for doing the right thing and putting their mobile game on Steam, particularly if they're going to be very honest about it and tell you straight up that that's what they're doing. Let's see, that, and that. The kind of spin-off game, Destiny Child Wars, I believe is the name of it. Let me see if I can actually look up the name, just so I'm sure. Yeah, it's Destiny Child Defense War, which is kind of a tower defense game. Yeah, I'd say it's pretty much a tower defense game in a mobile form factor. It has finally come out of its limited pre-release, and now I think is in more of a global pre-release or just official release scenario. So I am now once again able to play it, instead of it not working. There isn't the best argument to continue playing it, and that certainly will just waste more of my focus as far as trying to play the original Destiny Child game, which I want to get back to playing that and doing a better job of making sure everything actually gets done as far as using all the stamina. The latest event is about to start in a couple of days, as there's always a latest event for Destiny Child. And it should be a particularly good event because it's the 2nd anniversary for Destiny Child, which I'm very confused about that the game really has only been out for 2 years, because for as much as it is a gacha game, there's a lot of characters and a lot of content in there for 2 years. A lot of support. In a weird way, games like that just have constant updates need to potentially have some of their updates relaunched for new players, because if you were a new player to Destiny Child now, it would be the best bet you could do, but they're about to put in a whole new system called the Ignition system that has been in the Japanese and Korean version, and I guess that might be the case really as to why it's a 2nd anniversary, is that it's the global version might be a 2nd anniversary, where the Korean version might be approaching 4 or 5 years. And I wouldn't be surprised if 3 or 4 years down the line we stop getting really any updates to because the Korean version has long since stopped making content. But I also wouldn't be surprised if that's not the case. But yeah, I'm still enjoying Destiny Child more than any other games. I'm slowly, every now and then logging into the adult game College Days, which is a Simpsons Tapped Out clone, and I've really only got a couple more relationships to max out, and then there's literally nothing else that to be done. It feels like the game has been completely abandoned, and it really is a tale of two styles of supporting your game. You have Destiny Child that is arguably over supported, with just every month there being new content, new things to do, tons of things you can buy if you want to be a whale. And then you have School Days, where they have just completely failed to even update it and have like a Halloween event or a fall event or a Christmas event. And yeah, that's just crazy. It's way crazier on school or college days case, because there's totally room for a ton of microtransactions to be bought in that game, and had somebody actually bought those microtransactions and rushed to the end, they would have been left just totally unsatisfied, because gacha games just don't work if there isn't always something new to do. Cell phone games in general don't work unless there's something new to do. You don't want a scenario where people say, well, I've done everything here, I'll just uninstall this and save myself some space.
You're done for. It was nearly done.
I don't know if I mentioned the price. It's free to play here with in-app purchases as far as Arc of Defense. And in all fairness, this probably does look like a decent tower defense game compared to a lot worse versions we've seen of tower defense games. But I don't know how many people really want to play any tower defense games at all. I feel like my buffer is working really, really well, because I'm seeing that the buffer is on occasion going down a little bit, but then it comes back up, and we're still at 0 network drops and like 12 frames due to rendering lag and 20 due to encoding lag, which even those insignificantly small numbers are a little concerning, but not really, because I've made like 300,000 frames in total, so potentially 12 out of 300,000 is an insignificant number. Let's see. Do we want to do this? Do we want to do this? Let's do this. And then do this. Here we have a game on Steam called Summerland, which is from FYRE Games, which looks like it's a slightly pretty walking simulator. It's free to play, but then the soundtrack is $5.35 English full audio. The achievements have letters and numbers. I want to look at this developer because I recognize this name. They've also made a game called Into the Unknown, which is mixed at 63. And then we have a game called Welcome to the Dreamscape. Let's see what that is. This came out in 2018. Yeah. Looks asset flippy also. Yeah. I don't think that game is quality enough to make it to the fall list. Let's do this.
The stars pale beside me. I can meet my quota. Hey, let's play.
Attack. there. Here, Gamatsu has an article. N1 RV A has been delayed. Nirvana. No longer coming out in 2020. This feels like a visual novel that is probably going to be a lot like several other visual novels where it kind of has a bar hangout feeling and you spend a lot of time talking to people in bars. That's what it feels like. I'm not sure if that's really what it is. Wouldn't be surprised if there was also some cyberpunk in it. Next we have a game on Steam here called Genius at Work, which looks like a mobile game being ported to Steam to make mechanical contraptions of sorts. Kind of in a Minecraft, if you were going to have Minecraft just be about building mechanical things. This is $2.99 English and Spanish. I just don't think that there's enough content here to justify a game, though. Yeah, it'd be hard to call that a game. I'm gonna hit this, and then this, and then I'm gonna hit this,
It was nearly done.
and then hit that. Twitch support has gone in a weird route here, in the sense that 18 hours ago they said if you streamed the Fortnite Nexus War event, you want to be conscious about DMCA risk from the music in that event, consider exporting/downloading and deleting any related video on demands or clips. So instead of helping people mute music or being helpful at all, they're just saying, hey, this is a huge event that Fortnite had, for as big as Fortnite might be at this point. I'm not sure how big it really is because a lot of the chatter has died down on that. Instead of being helpful, we're just going to tell you, hey, download this, which would be copyright infringement too, exporting and downloading something that you is still an infringement of some sort, I'm sure. So Twitch has opened themselves up to some legal liability, I imagine, there by saying, hey, we just told all of our people who may have streamed something they didn't have the fair use rights to download it and delete it from our servers, but keep it for themselves. Where a better run company, should any exist, would almost certainly say, hey, if there's this big event and a lot of things are going to be DMCA'd, or we expect a lot of things might be DMCA'd, let's go ahead and immediately lock down all these videos in a preemptive strike, because that would be the better thing to do. And this would be definitely a problem, certainly, but the smarter move would be to say we are going to immediately take down any videos of the Fortnite Nexus War event if they are DMCA'd, as we must immediately do for any other DMCA claims. So you might want to consider downloading it for your own personal backup, or editing your videos, having an edited video ready to go. Like, they're trying to be helpful, but they're really not offering you anything that it would be helpful. There's no mute button, assumedly in Twitch, like there's a automatic mute option somewhat in YouTube. Although in all fairness, I have not like had anything where I haven't fought any of the content ID claims on YouTube in a long time, so I haven't actually gone and tried to mute any music or see how those algorithms actually work these days. They weren't 100% successful in the past, but they did work on occasion, particularly in the case where you're constantly talking. If you're not talking, then it's just going to potentially mute all the audio. So on top of that less than helpful post, 20 hours ago, they're investigating an issue causing multiple service issues at the moment, including but not limited to logging in, loading the site, notifications and alerts, stream details missing, some site elements missing. They will update you shortly. Then 19 hours, then an hour later, they said, we fully recovered from that problem. Thanks you for your patience. Which inherently that means some back-end server somewhere, of which there again should be some load balancing between different back-end servers, had gone down. There definitely could have been more of an upstream issue where more than one of the back-end server elements went down because somebody updated something that updated the back-end servers. But once again, this is just a great example of Twitch support, unfortunately highlighting all of its flaws without really balancing out the concept of making new announcements or just posting positive things to try and spin the narrative, which makes it really, really difficult to think that you would want to jump from the awful YouTube to something like Twitch. Yeah, I'd almost wouldn't be surprised if Twitch itself was in part owned by the same people that own Google and YouTube, as a form of just counter programming and owning the market. Which at a certain level, almost certainly that is the case. Jeff Bezos probably does own a decent amount of Google stock, as much as he owns Apple. No, not Apple. Amazon.com, which owns Twitch. Moving on, TechRaptor has an article. Marvel Powers United VR is reportedly shutting down in 2021, which, yeah, apparently that it hasn't been out. Single player might be also shutting down. There we go. Finally got a victory. Did I finally get enough victories to move on? Let's see. We can play Bloodcraft now instead of playing Fairies, because I am super tired of playing Forcecraft. And honestly, I an hour and 13 minutes into the stream, I'm fine to wrap up now. So let's hurry up and get through these games. Here we have a game on Steam called Elite Commander, which looks like it's an on-rails shooter, like arcadey style game that maybe is designed for cell phones, but this is a style of gameplay we've seen in arcade games before, the light gun shooter style where you can duck and cover, that might actually transition fairly nicely to a cell phone game. This is $1.79 English only. It says more than 50 levels. I want to put this on the follow list because this is an interesting idea. It definitely does open up the idea that maybe there can be some parallel thoughts to some of the experiments that were done in big expensive arcade machines before consoles existed, and now cell phone games. in the sense that, in particular, arcade machines were designed so that they would just take your quarters and you wouldn't spend too much time on the machines. At least originally when an arcade machine would launch, there tended to be fairly long lines and not that many games in an arcade. Eventually, that system broke down fairly quickly because there was actually a lot of older arcades that would sit in corners and people would just never play them. To the point now where if there was an arcade in every city in the United States, the vast majority of the arcades would be completely empty for most of the time. And that was true even like 10 years ago, is that arcades became very, very empty. It's way easier to play a Switch than go pay money to play in an arcade. Let's see. Deal 1 damage to an enemy. Evolve.
Come on in. Take a seat.
Time to dance.
Let's continue moving. Next, we have a game on Steam called Smart Thief. I went quiet there. Sorry. This just looks like a polygonal stealth game. Yeah.
New contract.
Running around, stealing everything you touch, and then doing the Metal Gear turning into a box concept. I feel like this is actually going to be a fairly easy game, though. I don't think that there's really much here. $1.97 English only. It really feels like there's literally just one quote-unquote house with several different layouts, and that's it. I wouldn't be surprised if there aren't actually that many layouts even. 1 damage to an enemy. Right, play that. Evolve. I wish there was a higher value to having this card in your hand. Like, that would be a great expansion to having a Natrian Great Tree. Is if you have a Natrian Great Tree in your hand, activate this ability on several different characters. Instead of having to always put it on the field and take up a spot, which makes it often not really worth existing. Gamasutra has a job listing here. Gameloft is looking for a lead game designer in Brisbane, Australia. Right. 1 damage to an enemy. And then 3 damage to an enemy. And then attack. And then attack. Tech Raptor has the Yogscast Jingle Jam 2020. Lets you get great games and help charity. Is this through Humble Bundle? No. This year it's not through Humble Bundle. Let's see. Looking at these games, Dream Daddy, Starbound, Among Us is a pretty decent one. Perfect Dates, Ferraria, War of the Overlord is probably a decent game this War Mine. Honestly, I'm seeing maybe 3 or 4 of these games actually being something that would be on the high list of what games I'd want. A lot of these I've never heard of. like the Sock Pop Season 6 bundle is ridiculous because Sock Pop is garbage games that have been flooding Steam, and inherently that I would have liked to see Steam eliminate that publisher instead of them them being in a bundle. Like here we have Element Tower Defense 2 also. You know, I haven't ever listened to the Yogscast. It probably would be interesting to try and listen to some of that. I haven't even given them the time of day. But yeah. If it turned out the Yogscast was a little bit more video game related than, say, the Bombcast is these days, that would be appealing.
Rain drowns the wails of the damned.
When will this cruelty end?
Is this guy gonna win? Okay. So this could give me enough to kill one of these guys, but probably not both.
Delightful. I'll show you something nice.
Hmm.
A bloody climax. You know you want this.
I guess I wasn't good enough.
Gamma Sutra has an article here. Salesforce is going to acquire Slack in a $27.7 billion. Now, what is Salesforce? I think it's a business services company. And Slack is definitely a chat app that was used inside businesses a lot. Inherently, I think there is not a great reason to still be using Slack other than just the workflow, not changing the workflow of employees. There are unfortunately several like business only communication softwares out there that there should be some consumer end to that, where it would make sense for a consumer to be familiar with how it works. Zoom is kind of a great example of the way things should work, in that Zoom is fairly easy to get going and set up. It may not be great, it's definitely not secure, but people know how to use it to a certain level, whereas Skype and other services have been less user friendly, and then Zoom has now shifted a lot from being used only personally to starting to be used professionally. And I imagine Zoom and other services like that have eaten into the idea of Slack quite a bit. See, and having a connection timeout like that is perfect because I'm still not dropping any frames. It's not, well, it's not exactly perfect. Ideally, you would just have infinite amount of bandwidth, but yeah, it's better than nothing. It is much better in the quality of service to have streaming work and have the server, the video game, be a little slow, just a little slow. Next, we have a game on Steam here called Black Motion, which looks like it's an attempt at making something like Infinifactory, but I don't think it has enough polish to actually be something like Infinifactory. It looks a little Minecrafty too. I just don't think there's enough here though.
Time to get started.
it's weird to see two games that are kind of conveyor belt technology style things. Inherently, this is programming in a visual way, but it's also kind of the worst way to potentially teach something like programming, because it's visual and it has no connection with how you really need to think and how you really would need to work with programming software. This is $13.49 English only. Some pretty ugly achievements. 29 unique levels is particularly small. I'll see if I did that. Could do that. See, next we have a game on Steam called Take Me Home, which seems to be a game where you play as a wolf with a health and stamina bar. Third-person adventure game full of wonders and mysteries. 3D platforming, puzzling. You see fairly pretty environment here. Inherently, a lot of this is just like speed tree style, algorithm generated content. I don't know if you're actually going to have any abilities or if this whole thing is just going to be a chase sequence. $7.99 English only. I'm going to put this on the follow list though. It might be something interesting here. But also wouldn't be surprised if it gets reviewed very poorly, because it ends up being a walking simulator as a dog, which even that concept is something new, honestly. The idea of potentially just being a walking simulator with as something other than a human. Next we have a thing called Coup Linked, or Coop Linked. I don't even know how you'd pronounce that. Like if it's supposed to be coup and then linked, that makes sense. Or it could be couple linked. It seems like they've made up a word here and not really thought of it. This feels like this very well might be controlled by two control sticks to move two dots that are linked together, and almost like a music pattern. But yeah, that does not look like a game that actually interests me. It's early access, 99 cents English only. That does just kind of feel like nothing. Alright. Let's see.
I'm powerless for now.
So next we have Red Dead Online on Steam, which they said they were going to split off the online things, and you can see it's already mixed. $4.99. See. Get the story instead. Story mode on Red Dead Redemption 2 is a masterpiece, and online is nowhere near it. Very grindy with little to no reward. 111 gigabytes compressed download at launch. Literally not even 5 minutes into the game, and I run into a hacker who killed me instantly and flew off. Go to report him and the game crashes. Alright. Do I want to evolve? So yeah, people are not having a good time with Red Dead Online. I wanted to mention Dinnerbone here, Nathan Adams, the technical director of Minecraft, known for setting everything upside down, such as his profile picture, and if you name a character in Minecraft with a tag, Dinnerbone, they flip upside down. He has started basically streaming, and 22 hours ago, he became an affiliate on Twitch, which says two very different things, and I'm not sure if this is him and he's just aged considerably, or if this is a different picture. Like, this may just be he's aged quite a bit. But it says two very kind of sad statements there. One, that working for Microsoft effectively is not good enough, because he's working for Mojang, which is owned by Microsoft now, and he's become a streamer to the point where he cares about being an affiliate, which is saying a lot. It also says something about how, while Dinnerbone isn't PewDiePie by any means, he in the Minecraft community was well enough known that every single Minecrafter could have promoted his streaming service and gotten him to affiliate instantly. And yet that didn't happen. Perhaps there's just a decision amongst Minecraft streamers to not promote their competition, but yeah, that's weird. Certainly, as a failed YouTuber, as I like to call myself, like the idea of seeing people who you would more than likely assume were successes to such an extreme level that they would not bother to go down the route of getting a podcast or becoming a Twitch streamer or becoming Twitch streamers. So certainly a lot of that could also be that the pandemic, though. It could be that Dinnerbone literally only started streaming when he was, because of the pandemic, and he became an affiliate a lot faster than I think he did. Okay. This. And then this. And then evolve that. And then play that.
So many souls.
And then play that. Moving on, Gamma Sutra has an article here. Supercell is shutting down Heyday Pop after less than a year. Supercell, I believe, is the publisher of many cell phone games, including Clash of Clans, I believe. I could be wrong about that. Clash Royale, I know I was playing that, and I think that was a Supercell game. TakeRaptor has an article. The Xbox Game Pass is getting bigger hits this December. So, they're getting Control for Android and Xbox, Doom Eternal, Haven, Rage 2 for Android. I don't understand some of these listings here, actually. How is Rage 2 on Android? Slime Rancher, Android and Xbox, Valhalla, Cyberpunk Bartender. Yes, you're good. See, there was a game called Valhalla, Cyberpunk Bartender game, and maybe the sequel is delayed. Dragon Quest 11 coming to PC and Xbox. That's a pretty good deal for PC gamers, but most of these are not for PC. Call of the Sea for PC, Starband for PC, Monster Sanctuary, I'm not sure what that is, Until the End for PC and Xbox, Assetto Corsa, Gang Beasts, Greedfall, Super Hot, Mind Control Delete, Ukulele, and the Impossible Lair. That is a decent deal. Although there are also some games here that are leaving the Games Pass list, which we don't talk about that very often. We don't talk about games coming to the list or leaving actually very often, but like eFootball Pro Evolution Soccer 2020, people might be upset about that if they like that game. Infinifactory disappearing, Metro Last Light, Pathologic 2. Some of these definitely are games that you could have played and been done with, whereas Infinifactory might take a little bit longer, Metro Last Light might take a little bit longer. Naruto the Boruto Shinobi Striker as a fighting game you'd potentially want to keep forever. And I guess that is the danger inherently of having a Games Pass streaming service, that games can disappear as much as they can appear. Yeah, Giant Bomb was talking about the reason why more games right now might be coming out for the PlayStation 5 than the Xbox is that apparently the Xbox did not release development kits as early as Sony did, that they were waiting on AMD technology to come out, and thus now there will be a slight delay, which I don't think is going to really hurt. I honestly don't think it's going to hurt Microsoft sales that much, because it's not really the year to sell consoles anyway, so they can have a very slow rollout over the course of 2021, as potentially people might have some finances at that point. Yeah, it seems like the only way this deck really works is if I have Bloody Mary on the field. And if I don't, I'm kind of wasting my time. TechRaptor has an article. PlayStation 5 activities features were created for thriving single-player communities. I also heard that the PlayStation interface now will censor and not let you send any bad words in tweets, which I imagine they probably have just a global censorship function that happens if you type anywhere. So let's see. There's a quote here. We can change should I start playing to which part should I start playing as a thought. There's this presentation that this article's based on had several things that they were hearing from single players: an inability to dedicate enough time to play a game, and more importantly, a lack of knowledge on how long a gameplay activity will take, which inherently that is always a problem. I often don't bother to go to howlongtobeat.com to get a general idea of just how much time am I really going to have to invest in a game, or how am I going to present it as a YouTube content creator. Am I going to make 30-minute episodes to an hour long episodes? The story about my uncle, I made like hour and 40-minute long episodes, and even at that, the game as a series is going to go too long for a rage quit. Gamers also said the difficulty of discovering useful information in help videos on the internet, which I don't run into that too much. Like, particularly video game, like, videos. Let's see. Yeah, I would definitely have to disagree with that idea, because I feel like I can easily find help. Sometimes I have difficulty understanding what is written, because often it's text-based solutions to a problem in a game. They also talked about a challenge of talking about a game on social media without spoilers. Okay, that seems fairly obvious that you pretty much cannot talk about a game without it being spoiled. Although, frankly, you probably shouldn't be talking about a game without, if you won't want it spoiled. And frankly, you shouldn't be talking about the game until you've played it all the way anyways, because it's a pretty useless hot take to say I'm 2 hours into a 60-hour game and I'm really loving it. It is perhaps slightly useful to say I played 2 hours of game and I rage quit it, but even at that's not the most informed conversation one can have. And then the final problem they have of coming back after a long time and forgetting what they were doing. So PlayStation 5 activities, which is apparently the title of a feature or group of features, are going to try and address those issues and make for a better play experience. Let's see. Let's keep on playing. Next, we have a game on Steam called Subway Train Simulator 2D, which, of all the train simulator games, the 2D one does not make any sense to me. $4.49 English only. Also, that makes no sense. If you're going to make a train game, it probably should support Japanese. Next, we have a game on Steam here called Wizards of the West, which is just a polygonal, low-effort game. We haven't seen a ton of low-effort games today so far. $3.99 English. Okay. See. Next we have Project Wingman. I think we may have already looked at this game or a very similar game. $24.99, requires VR, bunch of languages, full audio on English. Let's see. Are we gonna get anything? See, no, we saw a VR game that kind of looked like this, but the interior interface was very blocked and the controllers and the buttons seemed to be very low resolution. Like, you still do have this kind of bar that's in your way, which probably is true. You probably do have a bar in your way when you in your visual angle when doing this. But this does feel like much more of a game. So I guess I'll put this on the fall list. As a VR game, this does seem like it would be a different kind of VR experience. 21 campaigns. But yeah, highly unlikely I'll ever get VR. Highly unlikely it would ever gain fashion. I actually saw somebody has made a device so far to actually spray smells now for VR setups to introduce one of 7 sins, which is pretty crazy. and almost certainly not going to go anywhere. Game Sutra has an article here. EG7 has pinned a deal to acquire the EverQuest and H1Z1 developer Daybreak for $300 million. Although arguably, I would say EverQuest is a dead MMO and H1Z1 is a dead, I guess maybe it's an MMO too, zombie shooter game. So buying those companies for $300 million does seem like perhaps a bad investment right now. Here we have Chronos Before the Ashes. I believe we had already seen the review for this game, and it was about mixed, and we can see now players of the game seem to be fairly mixed on this too. That being said, if any of these screenshots, I need to go back and adjust to make sure images load faster. I think I want to put this on the fall list in the hopes that there might actually be a patch. In this one case, I think there might be a chance of a patch. Let's see, if we show here, and see, the Watchmaker had a gameplay mechanic like this also, where the character gets older as they play, and apparently you can play as a male or a female. And the Watchmaker was a pretty bad game, though. Aging mechanics in general don't really work. This is published by THQ Nordic. It's made by Gunfire Games. It feels like there might be a way to potentially get something out of this that makes it a little bit better. But I think a lot of the complaints, if I recall the review correctly, were just the monotonous grind of it, and that's it. UI looks like it's basically a placeholder. Animations are unfinished. Notably, things here are when you hit enemies that don't react. The effect of hitting enemies being meh and climbing ladders locks you into the animation, taking control away from the character. The whole thing looks like an old alpha version. Controls are alright, but very simple. Text boxes look alpha. The whole point and click interface inventory for puzzles does not belong at all, and it's not intuitive enough, nor does it belong on a game played on a PC or TV. Rather, it looks like it was made for a handheld device. So, yeah. I'm gonna make an executive decision as far as Chronos Before the Ashes. Put it on the fall list, but I do think it has a upward challenge to potentially improve itself and patch out a lot of things and try and make a game there. Do 1 damage to both leaders.
I can devour your dreams.
Next we have Cookie Invaders on Steam, which is a shoot 'em up game where you're shooting cookies. It's kind of got like a Cuphead vibe to it. Shoot 'em up at this level with these kind of graphics might also indicate that it's less of a bullet hell game. Also might just be that somebody was trying to do something different here. I mean, you still have the problem with a lot of shoot ups where there's not much happening on the edges. It's 21.24, which sounds like really, really expensive. English only. I want to put this on the fall list, but that price does make that a difficult choice. So let's see if this developer's made anything else. No. I'm gonna put this on the fall list, but yeah, they really dug their own grave by not selling it cheaper. Let's see. Do that. Hit that. Down on the field. Do that. Then do that. See, next we have a game on Steam called Conqueror 940 AD, which doesn't look like anything. Yeah, and I wanted to end early. This is 15.29 English only. Not gonna put it on the fall list. Wanted to end early, and I don't even see the beginning of the end here. I could potentially leave some things for Friday, and then we could potentially leave some things over the weekend and build up a buffer, but I'm not sure that's really going to work in a game. It probably would work, but I just have to train myself to hold back instead of trying to finish things.
How about we have some fun?
Let's see.
Go! Go! Fear not, for no one else has to know.
So hard to raise kids these days.
There we go. Next we have a game on Steam here called Beyond Polaris Guardian, which on the looks of it, it seems like what they've done is they've taken some pre-rendered adult content characters and put them in these like skin tight, might as well be naked spacesuits, and they're showing a little bit of visual novel conversations happening here, but not much even at that, and they're calling it an action RPG game, but honestly this kind of feels like more of an adult game, which is odd because it's not being tagged as having actually different content or adult content. See, it kind of feels like what Fallout 1 would have felt like, or what a lower level of funding would have created something like Mass Effect. But it's hard to believe it's much of anything when the beginning of this video is just showing off her as a character on the main screen.
Is what you wanted.
And then here you have a floating character and then another character. This is definitely a creator that is interested in showing off skin tight bodysuits, and they've even thrown in some male characters too into the mix, which I can always appreciate. But it makes it very questionable, certainly, as to whether there actually is a game. I'm gonna put this on the fall list to see if maybe people could say they love it, but I don't know if I actually believe that. Okay. If I play this, it doesn't work. So I want to do this. I want to do this.
Stay out of my axis reach.
And then if I evolve here,
Check this out.
I'm gonna knock you out of nice.
Hit that. Hit that. Hit that. I won.
You're a solid fighter.
So yeah, only way to win with that deck is to have Bloody Mary on the field and be able to keep Bloody Mary on the field. Which inherently, I think that pretty much means now we would just need victories in general, so let's just try something like Portal Craft. And I'm going to just start covering the news, and then we'll get back to video games. Dauntless developer Phoenix Lab has opened 2 new studios to support growth in Montreal and Los Angeles, which undoubtedly a lot of these developers probably were in the process of opening new studios before the pandemic started, and they almost certainly regret it now. Here we have an Gamma Sutra article. Apple has picked Genshin Impact as its iPhone Game of the Year, which, yeah, not a lot of people are talking about Genshin Impact. I think in part the problem is there's just no content after you've hit the end game there, and it's very easy to hit the end game on Genshin Impact, so it's actually a game where you would ruin the experience for yourself if you'd bought a bunch of microtransactions and accelerated the experience. I also don't think Genshin Impact has a notable player versus player element, if it has any player versus player elements. So that closes the door to a reason why players might keep coming back and playing. TechRaptor has an article. Star Fox 64 Survival Mod is a unique nostalgia trip. What does this do? Let's see, Star Fox meets Pikeman. What are you doing here? New hack that will almost certainly get DMCA'd. Yeah, this looks like Zelda. But you're playing as Star Fox. Yeah, this definitely feels like this is on the Zelda engine, playing as Star Fox, which there was a Star Fox adventure game, which most people assume was not actually supposed to be a Star Fox game to start with. Yeah, I'm not sure you're not just playing Ocarina of Time though with just skins. And I don't know inherently why you would call that Star Fox 64 Survival. It feels like that would, if you were going to call something Star Fox 64 Survival, it would probably should be a mod that makes it so that it's a hardcore mode where you have only one life in Star Fox 64, or there's more that is done by collecting laser power-ups and bombs. If you modded Star Fox 64 so you were always getting the laser ups and bombs, even if you were at the maximum, and then that led to giving you resources that would potentially, I don't know, empower the Lilacs central system and make a very difficult modded final boss easier. That might be something. Let's do that. See, this was supposed to synergize with these, and it totally didn't.
Found your weakness. Begin.
Attack here. TechRaptor usually doesn't talk about mods also, so you can see how they are not super busy at the moment. Gamma Sutra has an article here. Fortnite's Season 4 season finale attracted 15.3 concurrent players. Okay, so that is a fairly high number of players. But I wouldn't be surprised if that's going to be the biggest number they get going forward. TechRaptor has an article here. The Desperados 3 developer Me. There was a like music video called Me a few years ago, I believe. 1 damaged all enemies.
The heavens will hear the roar of my sword.
I'm going to lose miserably here. Yeah, Me is going to self-publish their next project, which, okay. It's codenamed Soup Kartoffel. I suppose that's how you pronounce that. Which, who knows what that could mean. Let's see. Let's do Swordcraft. A animation group called Aardman is partnering with Bandai Namco for a new cross-media IP. Partnerships follows the collaboration on 11 Memories Retold. The project will be current in future platforms. This is not really useful information. It's just too early. TechRaptor has an article here. Avalanche Studios founder has announced a new studio called Liquid Swords, which is kind of interesting because I guess that means he's been out of the video game industry for a while, or out of at least Avalanche Studios for a while. And so he's coming back into the video game world. I think there's just a lot of no competes and things that happen when people leave video game companies when they're high up. Gametsu has the Grand Blue Fantasy Festival, or Fez, 2020 schedule being announced. I have been slow to the uptake to realize that the Japanese have started just calling festivals Fezes, F-E-S's, and I've seen FES mentioned several times and not realized that more than likely that does stand for festival. I assume that's what that stands for. So, yeah, I'll have to remind myself that's what that means. Also, from Gametsu, a Fate Project New Year's Eve TV special is set for December 31st, which announcements, and the Fate series of light novels to video games to anime, to anime, then to video games, I'm sure. It's still seemingly going fairly strong. TechRaptor has an article. The Dauntless developer Phoenix Lab is working on new games, which basically means nothing. Almost certainly every game company is working on new games. They say they will continue to work on Dauntless. Dauntless seems to be a card game. I wouldn't have guessed that. I've heard of a game called Dauntless, certainly, but I wouldn't have been able to tell you how it was. TechRaptor has a review for Sam & Max Save the World Remastered. Let's see what they have to say about it. More and more, I wonder if this literally is just the widescreen mod that I used. They gave it 9.0. Sam & Max Save the World Remastered is the perfect antidote to 2020 with updated visuals, the great Switch porting and terrific writing that still holds up over a decade later. Only a few frustrating puzzle solutions stand in the way of a practical perfection. Pros are remastered graphics and audio, so the audio is improved. Both look and sound great. Top-notch comedy writing, wonderful, smooth Nintendo Switch port. Cons are several obtuse puzzle solutions leading to frustration. I could certainly see how updating the graphics and making it widescreen for the Switch opens up the door for making a remastered version for PC. Tankruptor has an article review here for a game called Morbid and the Seven Acolytes, which here we've got a monster with hooks all throughout him. And I assume you're playing as this character. Fun and difficult, but oddly designed. There is some real pixeliness, like intentional pixeliness in the way these life bars are designed and the depictions are designed. You have a just burst open stomach of a whale. It definitely seems like it's going for monstrous gore. They gave it a 7.0. This guy's taking his sweet time. Morbid the Seven Acolytes is a fun Souls-like, but it suffers from odd world design decisions. Pros: varied enemy designs, great boss battles, varied array of weapons, well-designed controls. Cons are poor world design and a lack of mechanical explanation. I assume in this case this isn't a reviewer who just did not like the visuals, but it definitely on a skim feels like that might be the case. But in fairness, I don't know if I really like these visuals either. If these were smoother, then I might like them, but the oddness of the pixeliness here and the pixeliness in this like laser bullet shot, and then kind of pixeliness here and pixeliness down here, and then pixeliness here, just feels like everything could have fairly easily just been smoothed out with a basic smoothing filter and it would have been better. I wanted to point out this article from thepennyhoarder.com, The Future of Video Game Jobs, a snapshot of fields in the booming industry. This was retweeted, I believe, by the ESA. And I just wanted to point out this image. None of these people here in this stock photo are working on video game development. No way in a million years. This is a control room for a major network internal IT department. Each of these monitors is pulling up some statistic for servers and things that they're supporting. They've got several web pages over here that might be of use to these three people. And this inherently, I really question when you have these giant walls of displays whether any of that information is actually useful or if it is just there because some boss who might be walking around like this guy might want to look at it and he has the budget to potentially buy several fairly expensive monitors or TVs. Like there is an argument for having everything up on one screen so you can have instantaneous information, but it's not. Inherently also, these are not the kind of places I think I would ever want to work. I'm a big fan of cubicles and offices and being separate. The idea of people next to each other, potentially talking to each other and distracting each other is not great for pretty much any job. But there's no video game development here. Although there is a video game controller there, so I might be wrong. This might be some weirdly designed office. Usually video game developed offices that I've seen look nothing like that. They have at least tables and and smaller rooms, they almost certainly wouldn't have the budget for something like this. I wouldn't be surprised if this controller connects to some TV off on the side where the overnight team plays video games on the TV since nothing's happening. But yeah, not really what I would think. Apparently this is from Riot Games. Wow. Well, Riot Games is wasting their budget, I would say. Part of this also was talking about game presenters and announcers. If you want to actually read the article. And I suppose, yeah, Riot Games making League of Legends would run their servers this way. And that's the difference compared to game developers. So that, yeah, inherently this team is probably the network's team, and they don't actually program the games as much as they run the networks, which that's not to say they're not in the game industry or anything. It just is to say their focus is probably 99% networking and 10% video game interaction. Moving on, as I'm trying to wrap up here, TechRaptor has an article, World of Warcraft Shadowlands is Blizzard's return to form. I'm not sure anybody's super interested in World of Warcraft these days. Yeah. I'm not sure that even the way video games were developed before this will stay the way video games are developed going forward past the pandemic. I wouldn't be surprised if we have a standard in offices generally where people are moving away even from cubicles and open office spaces into just good old-fashioned offices and hiding away from people and staying away, if not doing remote work as much as possible. There is a larger danger of a lot of jobs telling people you just have to work from home, you just have to have your own computer, you just have to run your own electricity, water, things like that, and slowly people will be tricked into spending more and more money to maintain an office, and the employees will be making more and more profit at the same time, because it literally is not free to have a home office by any means. Also, I imagine people will start claiming home offices a lot more on taxes and getting audited, since that is the number one thing that the IRS loves to audit poor people for, is claiming of home offices, and it's not really worth it to claim as a deduction anyways. Game Sutra has that same article. They make it a little bit more obvious. The Wallace and Gromit maker Aardman partners with Bandai Namco on new game franchise, which I assume is probably a Wallace and Gromit arcade experience, or video game experience. Probably not an arcade experience. Which in the United States, Wallace and Gromit doesn't really inspire major fandom, so it might very well be a Japanese and Europe only release. I would say I suspect Aardman is probably one of the best clay animation companies out there, even if they are digitally making the clay animations. But unless you're going to make a remake of Clay Fighters, which Bandai Namco doesn't own, or make some other game with a clay animation, which probably wouldn't sell that well, there's really not a lot you can do. TechRaptor has an article here. Illuminati confirmed based on the Illuminati card game has been announced. Which, alright. So, is there anything here? It looks like it's a card game of some comedic effect. And there might be something here. It looks like it could easily be a mobile game. I'm not sure if there really is going to be a big fandom for something like that. Also, I wouldn't also be surprised if I saw that game in a few months on Steam and then immediately dismissed it as a troll game and joke game just by the name. TechRaptor has a review here for the game Twin Mirror, which you see a character with his back and then you see another character in the forward, facing forward. This feels like a growing list of games that are more narrative, like Life is Strange, but in a weird way, Twin Mirror seems like it actually has more appeal to adults, whereas so many of those games seem to be targeting angsty teenagers at best instead of a more mature audience that probably would be more interested in those type of games. TechRaptor reviewed this and they said they gave an 8.5. Twin Mirror's concise narrative and an innovative detective gameplay is a heartfelt and earnest, though in small scale personal story is left though the small scale personal story is left open-ended. The pros are it genuinely makes the player feel like a detective, the personal narrative with real small town stakes, believable and well-written characters, which that is something that a lot of the Life is Strange style games, including Life is Strange, kind of failed at. Is you really didn't have well-written characters. You often didn't have believable characters. The cons is it has an open-ended finale providing no closure, and it has a strange, clunky mini-games. Yeah. We desperately need more games where it's an adult just dealing with adults and acting like an adult. We've had decades of kids acting like kids going on adventures, or kids acting like adults going on adventures. Even the latest game, I want to call it, it's not Life is Strange, what am I thinking about? The Last of Us 2, Part 2. Like, even that game really shows the issue that you run into with kid characters trying to grow up kid characters, and then them still feeling more like kid characters, and then or them feeling like they've been aged up too quickly. Like in a lot of ways, I think a lot of the characters, and from what I've heard of the story of that game, sounded fairly childish and silly. Like childish, not in their actual actions, but childish in their ways of thinking and their ways of acting. Now, arguably, you could certainly say there are a lot of adults out there, and there always have been a lot of adults out there that were really, really childish, but yeah, we don't need to see that in games. We have a Gamatsu article here. Sachibato President, it's time for battle. Maju Wars has been announced for PC, which this is a kind of different, maybe a little bit rougher animation style. It doesn't look as good. It looks a little bit older. And yeah, it looks like it's a possible visual novel experience. This is one of those games where it's going to come down to, is this different or is this badly animated? It also seems to me like it might be either an RPG with a weird visual angle top down or a side scroller. See. Duplicate. Gamatsu has an article here. The laid back camp virtual lake Matosu and Fumotu campsite have been announced for PS4, Switch, PC, iOS, and Android. I feel like both of these are based on a anime that is, I think, going on right now or recently went on, where it was a group of 4 anime girls trying to go to Antarctica, and it's like a journey story of them going to Antarctica to meet with one of the girls' parents who she hasn't heard anything from, and so it's kind of like this camping trip experience. So of course, going to Antarctica is a hugely difficult challenge, and you're not more than likely going to be allowed to do it, even if you tried. So there's a kind of a level of fantasy there. Also, you'd almost certainly die. And a group of high school girls going that far. Even getting as far as Australia is a huge journey from Japan. It is, as I believe, far from Japan to Australia as it is from Japan to Hawaii. Next, we have a game on Steam here called Snowman Saves Christmas. This is clearly Christmas themed, low effort frustration platformer. $6.99 English only. I've run out of stories to cover. Here we have a game on Steam called Endless Shiny Blues, which I suspect is maybe a Chinese visual novel. Seeing a lot of text. We see about 2 characters, and English is not supported. 254 Chinese. Not a bad one though. That looks a lot better than a lot of them I've seen from China. Let's see. We hit this, and then hit this, and then evolve. And then attack.
I would cry if I could.
See. Next we have a game on Steam called The Wednesday. True story based adventure game transfers time to fulfill the wish of a lifetime. Immerse yourself in a world of 3D graphics. It feels like this is some kind of Chinese like horror story going through time and being set either in China or Japan. Probably opens you up to some fairly horrific storytelling going through real world time. Yeah, it seems like they are very well covering a story of characters playing as some of the horrific Japanese doctors who would vivisect and just do horrific experiments. Honestly, way worse than even the Nazis probably did. $14.99 Korean only. See, so inherently there's a danger here that while this very well may be the case that the Koreans are accurately describing what happened in Korea and in Japan during the time in which Japan was being really, really evil. The Koreans also have their own like bias to it, and the Japanese deny a lot of the accusations, and the truth is somewhere in the middle. And at a certain point, this stops becoming anything close to historically accurate and just becomes propaganda as far as an anti-Japanese sentiment, which Koreans do. A lot of Koreans do support, have some anti-Japanese sentiment, some of which is reasonable, but at a certain level it also is more of a story of not being reasonable, because it'd be like hating Germans now because of the Nazi times, and you know, that's really not any way to move forward with worldwide relations, is looking back always. Well, specifically for this game, the Wednesday, though, since it doesn't support English, I can dismiss it. But it definitely would I definitely would
The void seeps through all.
would struggle to play a game like this. You can even see in this review, like, let's see, here you have a negative review. When I was young, I immigrated to the States, and the Korea is not my first language. There's some difficulty in understanding the game since it does not support English. Anyways, I visit Korea due to COVID, and I researched Japanese military sexual slavery issue, which I always wondered. Interesting, he says Korea is not his first language, and English doesn't seem to be his first language either. A couple weeks ago, my friend told me about this game. But yeah, a lot of this inherently goes with the argument that Korea is still having with Japan, which Japan says that there were Koreans who chose to sleep with Japanese soldier when Japan was occupying Korea. Koreans are claiming that Japanese was forcing them into sexual slavery. Again, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. But also, I think the families are just, and Koreans in general, are trying to potentially get lawsuits through. In a weird way, it's a lot like the Civil War in the United States, where it's a scenario that is just gonna become politicized and never resolved, or like a claim for reparations. That's really what it is. It's a Korean version of a demand for reparations that will never stop, regardless of, even if Japan did admit that everything they're claiming is true.
Is that a human?
Like,
Now furious.
Oh no, you don't!
Your service.
It's not enough yet.
interesting.
Gets past me.
Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called Shuttle Commander, which is mixed. Looks like it's a space game. It doesn't look bad, so I'm a little confused as to why it's mixed. Requires VR. It's 2124. Why is it mixed?
Let the clouds roll
Serious
in.
technical issues. Alright, well, I'm going to put this on the follow list since it's a VR game, and I'll reevaluate. Let's see. Now, if I attack this, that charges everything else up.
No one gets past me.
Power of mortality.
And see, I'm in a weird position where I can't really stop streaming even though I'd like to right now, because I've just got too many tabs. I actually did look yesterday at the Twitter feed, and that ended up highlighting a lot more games, which probably does just completely admit that there have been days where I've just totally missed some games, but not a high enough percentage to matter, really. Here we have a game on Steam called Fun Time with Buffy, which I don't know why you'd call a evil bunny Buffy. Actually, I could imagine a kid doing that. I find this is interesting that there's old Betty Boop cartoons. Are they public domain? I feel like this is just a horror game that we'll probably see somebody like PewDiePie play pretty soon. $6.24, English only. Personally, I don't think there's a need for me to put something like that on the fall list, though. Next, we have a game on Steam called Pirates of the Frontiers Reach, which is made in Unity and looks like a space game that's a little too asset flippy and doesn't look visually polished or unique in its gameplay. Early access, $19.99.
Let's speed things up. Too slow.
Next, we have a game on Steam called Fox in the Woods, which looks like a survival game where you're playing as a fox and you craft. I don't think I like this animation style. I don't know if I particularly like a leaf as a pointer on the mouse and a bird as potentially an attacker. They're trying to accomplish a lot here, and they don't seem to have succeeded that way. English only, student project, that explains a lot of it. I'm going to put this on the fall list. This definitely does kind of feel like a student project, but it also feels like they didn't have much time or skill to really polish it. Well, it's not video game related, but I guess I could mention that OpenZFS 2.0 has been released a couple days ago, which is the merger of ZFS on Linux and the ZFS for FreeBSD, which is not a Linux. It also introduces several features, better compression standard, a sequential resilvering process to make it potentially faster to recover data. I would almost certainly have to rebuild ZFS to get it to work on my server, and I don't think that's going to recover anything. Anyways, I think the data on my old server is just gone, and I'm really just letting the hard drive spin to kill themselves at this point. So, yeah, it does. It is an interesting move forward, because potentially in open source programming now you have twice as many people who are potentially going to be interested in working on the same project, making the same project work. And since ZFS is a file system, it needs as much help as possible to stay as cutting edge as possible to work accurately and correctly. Let's see.
Fear and despair are no match
No
for
one
me.
gets past
This.
me.
This is our way out.
No one gets past me.
This is our way out.
That. Next, we have a game on Steam called Tetra Online, which is just Tetris Online. It's mixed reviews, so it must not play that well. It's free, English only. Early access. Weird for a Tetris game to be early access.
Phoenix graces you with her presence.
There's a lot more.
Next, we have a game on Steam here called The Tides of Time,
To be graced by
which looks like an RPG of some sort. There might actually be something here. It has a time loop mechanic. It's $5.39 English only. I'm gonna put it on the follow list. I need more feedback here as to how that time loop mechanic really plays and whether there's enough of a game here or not.
Is that a
Hit that.
human?
Evolve that.
I'm done sticking my head in the clouds. I told you to leave.
Hit that. In the turn. Next, we have a game on Steam called Nevermore, a documentary kinetic novel, it says. Which, honestly, it just looks like a low-effort game.
Oh, why'd it have to
99 cents. What else?
destruction.
Monsters of Little Haven.
The resplendent Phoenix graces you with her presence.
English and Russian.
Phoenix graces you
10 to
with
15 minutes for 99 cents. Yeah, I don't think that there's actually a game there worth talking about. So 10 seconds, 10 minutes is ridiculous.
A bit of grace and polish for you.
Let's see. Next, we have a game on Steam called Queer Skins, a love story, which looks like a VR game where you're sitting in the back of a car while two people are in the front of the car. Although, honestly, it looks from the back like a male and female characters, and you're just kind of like the ghost here going through personal effects. Ed and Mary Helen. It says, take an emotional journey down a country road in rural Missouri along with Ed and Mary Helen, Sebastian's parents. Uncover Sebastian's life as you interact with his belongings and found in the box next to you. Was he disgraced like his father says, or a good man like the mother believes? This feels like this is probably 99% just looking at objects and reading, and maybe some live action full motion video in the front, but not that much. Like, what moves the story forward? Is it just time? Do you actually sit in this VR experience for like an hour? Just sitting in a car? $6.99 is a little cheap for VR. English, Spanish, Latin America, and Italian. And you kind of know nudity, static image. You kind of know where this story is going to go immediately, is that he's going to be some kind of LGBT character, and this story is probably not going to be written anywhere as good as they think. But I'm want to see what people's responses are to something like that. In a lot of ways, it feels like what they're showing you is a play,
By the heavens.
and I don't know how you're not really just going to have a play-like experience. Now I've become the one that's not playing. Destructoid has an article. The Wonderful 101 Remastered is getting a special Bayonetta themed demo with no new news on Bayonetta 3. So, yeah, you can play as this Wonderful 101 version of Bayonetta in the demo, but Bayonetta 3 is clearly not smoothly progressing as well as they would have liked, otherwise they would have something to have said. 3 to an enemy follower. Okay. Let's see. Next we have a game on Steam called Fate's Call: A New Beginning, which seeing a lot of backgrounds here. Not really seeing any characters or enemies or interface. Kind of feels like a polygonal Skyrim type clone, although Breath of the Wild is probably the more standard way to describe a fantasy game. They're calling it an action RPG game in VR for $14.99, English only, single player only. There might be something to that. We're actually getting a decent amount of VR games right now. I'm gonna just go home at this point. And let's see, 30 minutes I'll get more daily missions. 19 hours I'd get more daily missions. Let's see. Let's try and just burn through some games here. Let's see. We have Miss Santa's Gift Hunt, which I think we had already talked about this game. If not, it's total garbage from the level of graphics. It's free, it's English only, and oddly not even adult focused. See, next we have a game on Steam here called Wet Steps, which probably is a visual novel that starts with a anime girl slipping on the steps and landing on someone. Well, I was not expecting an elf character in torn clothes to attack. Alright, visual novel. $1.19, English, Russian, Ukrainian, Chinese. That probably puts it as not actually a Japanese game, since Japanese is not supported as a language. It also feels like there's a horror element, kind of like The Ring, happening here, because the video is jumping to some horror Ring style jump images here. I can see it's, yeah, there's this like creepy imagery that's jumping in the trailer. So yeah, and see, that I could imagine would creep out a lot of people, particularly if I could go back to like this point and they figured out a way so that the imagery did not show up the second time. That would be fairly creepy. But yeah, seems like there's more than meets the eyes for that game. Next we have a game on Steam called Millennium Atoll. Probably doesn't inherently mean it's a good game though. Which, single player sci-fi adventure where you play as a former child soldier and his son uncovering the largest conspiracy in world history. Is this kind of a point and click adventure? Maybe. $9.99. A lot of things making it to the follow list. Next we have a game on Steam called Park the Car, which seems to be a drawing mobile phone game that's been ported to Steam. Yeah, I don't see anything interesting there. $1.79, English only. Alright, I now see the end. Here we have VR Atlantis Search with deep diving, which visually does not look impressive. $4.19, English and a bunch of other languages. See, next we have a game called Delta Zero, which is apparently a puzzle game around the idea, I think, of either untwisting knots in connections or vector pathing algorithm. Yeah. Spanning tree protocol type pathing. I don't know what the right word is to use for that concept. $2.99, 1,500 puzzles. Clearly, though, this would not be an interesting experience to show off. It really is a puzzle game for private playtime, if ever to be played. Nobody's going to want to look over your shoulder and see that kind of gameplay. And arguably, I haven't put a lot of thought into the idea that there could be some games out there that might be interesting to do for yourself, but would be incredibly boring to even talk about with someone else. Typically, there hasn't been a lot of those. Next, we have a game on Steam here called Frostpoint VR Proving Grounds. So I feel like there has been a game called Frostpoint before. I'm not sure if this is from the same developers though. $24.99, bunch of languages. Let's look at this developer. In Exile Entertainment. They have a lot of things. Wasteland 3 in particular. But nothing called Frostpoint. But there is a decent amount of experience here. It's an online PvP though, so I don't need to put it on the follow list because I wouldn't play it. Let's see. Next we have Urban Basketball VR. I feel like all these VR games might have been an indication that there was going to be a VR sale, or there was expectation of a VR sale, and it got canceled. Because a lot of this doesn't make sense either. Seems like you're playing basketball and potentially playing basketball with a statue's head, which would be fairly insane. Let's see, $3.99, English only. Next we have a game on Steam called Demon Heart, which looks like a crazily hand-drawn RPG. And I'm not being particularly picky here. This is English and Russian. I'm kind of sticking on the follow list, just for no real reason. Let's see. TechRaptor has a review for that game, Project Wingman, that we saw. Let's see what they say. 6.5. If imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, then Project Wingman is the most blatant flattery I've ever seen. It's good, but never really manages to be better than a good Ace Combat fan game. Okay, so I probably need to find an Ace Combat game and see what the most recent Ace Combat game is on Steam, which I imagine that there aren't that many. Here we have a game on Steam called Finding Brenda, which looks like it's probably an asset flip game where maybe you play as a zombie, but yeah, I don't see. First part of an episodic 3D point and click adventure. Yeah, so it's a demo. Well, playing as a point and click adventure character, playing a point and click adventure as a zombie might be an interesting twist. We probably talked about this before. Euro Truck Simulator 2 pushes back the Iberia DLC to 2021 for all the Euro Truck simulators out there. Here we have a game called Epic of Sin, which I feel like we've seen. Empire of Sin. I really wish this game had been successful. It looks visually interesting. This is one of those games where you probably could take the art assets. You've got like all these people. You could probably take those skins and art assets and sell them to another company and make a completely different style of game around that. Which I do believe that is what we're going to start seeing in the next generation of game development. Is we'll see a lot of companies saying, we've got the music, we've got the feel, we've got the characters, we've got a fan base that loves these characters and the way they look. Let's put it into your game and make your game look a little bit better. If you had taken something like Telltale Poker and put in all the characters from Borderlands 1, that would have worked very well as a completely different from a RPG first-person shooter game. And that's inherently what happened with Tales for the Borderlands, is that you had a Telltale-style game in the Borderlands universe, and it worked very well. Here we have a game on Steam called Prehistoric Hunt, which, if I was going to play a hunting game, why not hunt dinosaurs? That's an interesting thought. It's early access for $17.99 if any of these images decide to load up. Come on. I think it feels a little dark screenshotty from the video here, but it looks fairly polished, somewhat polished at least. Maybe not perfectly polished. I feel like this probably is a lot more first-person shooting, instead of hiding up in like a blind and waiting for a dinosaur to come by and shooting it with what would have to almost certainly be a very high-powered rifle. I think hunting dinosaurs opens up the door to needing some kind of magical super weapons. And yeah, I just didn't see enough there to put that on the fall list. Next we have Lantern Light VR, which is yet another archery game. This time where you're shooting lit floating lanterns and seemingly not doing anything else. It feels like there's an attempt here to make some puzzles out of it, but I really wouldn't want to do that in VR. Like, VR controls are already wonky in the first place. Making a game that has time-based puzzles to escape the room effectively sounds very frustrating, and that's what I think I'm seeing there. Next we have Nickelodeon Kart Racers 2 Grand Prix, which, let's see, what characters, because that's the real question, is how many of these characters do I recognize versus how many of these characters would I not recognize? I, of course, recognize SpongeBob and CatDog and Cora. So far so good. Let's see. Is it mentioning any other characters? Slime. Alright, here we go. Choose your favorites from the Nickelodeon Hall of Fame, including JoJo Siwa. Don't know who that is. SpongeBob SquarePants, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, The Babies from Rugrats, Cool Kids from Arnold, Ren and Stimpy, Lincoln Loud and his sisters. Don't know who that is. That's not a bad breakdown, too. And inherently, since you don't have any real chance of a Mario Kart game coming out, this is probably the closest second to something like this that would make sense. Oddly, too, I feel like Nintendo Kart Racers 1 may have been made by THQ Nordic. I'm going to put this on the fall list. Um, it paints a interesting split as to whether you would want to play the Nickelodeon Kart Racers games on PC, or if you're more mature, whether you would want to play something like Kodakawa Jet Ski Girls, which is kind of more recent and more anime lewd moe girls game, but yeah, it's a very different split there. More than likely the Nickelodeon game, if it plays well, is the better choice. You probably have more of an audience, you'll have more characters, and it will be more intriguing. Next, we have a game on Steam here called Rough Night at the Garden Gallery, which seems to be paintings of famous paintings of dogs that you're running around this horrific gallery trying to collect keys, and then the characters come out of the dog paintings, come out of the paintings and scare you. This is a free game, English, so I don't even know what the trick here is. There's like no money to be made around this idea. So if this is just this developer's way of potentially trying to get somebody like PewDiePie to play these games, that might actually work. I assume it's like the game they made before was Kill It With Fire. That's $14.99. So inherently, if I was to buy this, which I shouldn't for that price, getting the free game and comparing two games that are made by the same developer might make sense. Kill It With Fire is there's a spider and there's ridiculous attempts to kill the spider, which is the old meme joke. Yeah, spiders don't bother me that much. I'm not in an area where there's a lot of really deadly spiders that come inside human dwellings, so if I were to see a spider, all that really means to me is that it's an indication that there are other well, not other, but there are insects that the spider is living off of in my house. So obviously I've done a poor job of killing insects or keeping the house clean, although sometimes insects come in because it's cold and it has nothing to do with the cleanliness of your house. And sometimes insects are just in houses and there's unfortunately nothing you can do about it. Next, we have a game on Steam called One Shot, which seems to be a game that's kind of a score arcade game where you get one shot and then the explosion of the one ship potentially shoots and explodes other ships around it. So you're just trying to get the highest score for $4.49 English only. The graphics aren't polished enough, and frankly, it's a little one note. A combo system and an explosion system is an interesting idea as a gameplay mechanic in a bigger concept in game. It's not an idea on its own that's interesting enough. Excuse me as I drink some water. I'm going long today. Here we have a game called 100 Hidden Birds, which is a hidden object game. Although I don't know why they're making them more and more black and white. This is also a game called 100 Hidden Snails and 100 Hidden Gnomes. So, yeah, 89 cents, English only, 100 Steam achievements, which makes it an achievement game and makes it a no-go. So, if one is an achievement game, almost certainly all of these are achievement games. You seem to potentially get a achievement for every single bird you found. And 89 cents to find 100 things is asking a decent amount of money. Like, I assume you're either dragging the background scene around or there are just different maps. So there's only like 5 or 10 collectibles in each section of one giant image. Next we have Mahjong Worlds, which it's hard to justify getting Mahjong. Although this one actually does look like it might be a decent attempt, on making Solitaire Mahjong 3D. I still feel like Kodakawa Mahjong from 2006 is still probably your best bet to play Mahjong Solitaire. $2.54, English only, third party end user license agreements. Yeah, that's a no for me. Almost certainly I wouldn't play a Mahjong Solitaire game again anyways. Here we have a game called Box Cats Puzzle, which is an interesting idea around Tetris's, squeezing in different cats of different sizes and shapes. But I feel like this probably has like 100 puzzles to it, and then that'll just be that. So $1.69, English, Japanese, Chinese, 34 achievements, 200 levels, casual mode with unlimited fun, and you can make your own levels to share with friends, which that does kind of improve the possible gameplay on something like this. So for the silliness of this idea, I'm gonna put this on the follow list, but I really would have to, I'd have to be pretty flippant to actually buy a game like that. Next we have a game on Steam called Tiny Strife, which seems to be what? Rogue-like turn-based combat game, according to the description. Yeah, it doesn't look like anything to me. It looks like a mobile game. $8.99, English and Spanish. No to that. Here we have a game called Zen Uru the Great, which is, if I was to guess, is a Chinese game that was either like the beginnings of an MMO or an action game that they turned into an action RPG game. And here they're definitely focusing the entirety of that footage on just getting not only awkward upskirt shots of the character, but foggy shots and zoomed out shots. That there's a lack of polish in the screenshots, which definitely makes me feel like there's a lack of polish in the game. Like, there's ways that you could do this to show off like skin tight bodysuits and do it right, and they're really not doing it. Even here where they framed the character decently, although I might give a little bit more room above her head, they've completely failed to frame anything on this side at all. And this character doesn't look particularly good. $3.99, English only, third party EULA, listed twice. Oddly, I don't think so. See, next we have Marble Parkour, which has been a while since we've seen the Marble game. I'll also say it's odd that we haven't seen any like major adult content in a couple of days. Like, every time I say let's give it till Friday or let's give it till next Friday, before that happens an adult game does come out. So I don't think it's reasonable to keep going down that path and saying, well, is this finally the point where Steam has put the pause on releasing adult content, particularly the Japanese anime style adult content? I doubt it. I imagine the Japanese developers just don't really have anything to put out right now, and maybe Steam is being slightly slow on approving some games, but they tend to always end up approving the games with their libertarian mentality, and meanwhile, there's still really no justification for them not to approve adult games when you have things like Marble Parkour, which is nothing but a low effort asset flip marble game on your storefront. If Steam is going to embrace curation, they're going to have to embrace curation on the worst of the worst games for probably a year or two before they could even start to justify the argument that their storefront and their experience is around supplying high quality games and not visual novels or adult games, lewd games, sex games. And they would have to basically rebrand their storefront from what it is right now, where Steam is just a open, wild playfield in which almost anything and everything is accepted. Next, we have a game called Superpower Rising of AI, which looks like a VR hack and slash fight zombies, fight robots, not zombies game. Not seeing much here. $17.99 is fairly expensive for VR. We're starting to see the beginnings of VR games getting cheaper and cheaper, which is a good thing. Unfortunately, that is not being accompanied by a increase in quality as far as VR games. If anything, it's the same quality, if not worse. And quantity isn't going up either. Here we have a game on Steam called The Sumerians, which is a city building simulator game in a Sumerian culture, which might be slightly interesting. I could see if you were in a history class and the history teacher really didn't want to teach you much about the Sumerians, they might have you play something like that. Inherently, that would be bad teaching, and there's no guarantee that there's any accuracy in a game like this. This is early access for $14.99, English and Spanish. Yeah, there was a lot of trends, certainly when I was in school, and I think even now, to try and have more games in the classroom, and as a way of just keeping people busy and trying to integrate that into the educational experience, and it pretty much has always really didn't succeed because the games were just not designed to be educational in any way. Next, we have a game on Steam called Wonder Defense, which seems to be like a planet-wide defense real-time strategy game, but also it kind of just seems like it's a big mess, like a Chinese game where it's just a bunch of ideas and concepts, and playing around the globe like this does seem very silly. There's a reason why people always flatten globes to maps. It's just visually easier to see. $8.79, English only. That's not making it to the fall list. We have about 5 more. Here we have Sam and Max Save the World, which was with the remastered, and it's on the following list. And it would be $9.99. I don't really think there's a justification on playing the game a second time anytime soon, though. Like, I really would like to see like this section here. I'm fairly certain in this section originally it put a TV letterbox image around you, and they've replaced that with maybe just an on-air sign at the top. A lot of this graphics, though, it's hard to see how they really improved because it's such a soft image anyways. Like, is there really an increased polygon count in this game, or is it really just the same with maybe some polishing? Yeah. See, at this point, this is where it goes. This was the point when I was using the mod to get it in full screen, where it didn't really work because you could see through the edges of the image. and that was about the only part as far as this first season of a 3-season long Sam & Max series. Here we have a political game called I Am Your President Prologue, which seemingly has images of real people in it, and seems like you're going to potentially play as the president, which not sure I particularly want to play a game like that, but it does seem like a better political game concept than just the standard political joke games. English only, and apparently I Am Your President, the full game, is coming out at some point. I imagine somewhere around Inauguration Day. Here we have a game called Case Kovacs Agent 228. Short, intriguing minigame telling the story of Elizabeth Kovacs, a missing woman from the game Nosebound. Is there really a game called Nosebound? This is free. So there's another game, and so this is like a demo. Like, clearly Steam has told people they need to make prologues or advertisements or demos or something. Otherwise, we would not be seeing anywhere as many of these teaser demos. Next, we have a game on Steam called Party Parkade, which looks like it's a car game, like around parking, maybe. It's player versus player, so split screen player versus player, English only. I don't think so. To that, 3 more games. Here we have a game called Hyperside, where seemingly in VR you create a virus and then release it, and that does feel like that is a different experience, although I'm not sure there really is a game here, or if this isn't just a couple of random thoughts being put together. Yep, this is more of a silly game, closer to like Neon Genesis Evangelion with the angels attacking than it is a Plague Inc. Style game. Half of these easily could have been monsters in Neon Genesis Evangelion, or angels. It's what they were called. $4.99 VR. Yeah, that really feels like a joke game that would only be worth a laugh for about 5 minutes. Again, a game it feels like somebody like PewDiePie might play, but not real players. Real players wouldn't enjoy. Oh, I shouldn't say PewDiePie's not a real player. He's probably not much of a real player, though. In all fairness, any successful YouTube content creator probably does not have a lot of time to play video games. And he does seem to be particularly fit for somebody who plays video games, so he's spending a lot of time in the gym or working out also. Here we have a game on Steam called Defenders of the West, which looks like it's basically a tower defense game in a Western theme, which there's a slight difference there, but not enough to get over the fact that it's still a tower defense game. Early access, $9.99. And then finally we have Hoser Hockey, which looks like this might actually be a decent cartoony style hockey game for $9.59 English only. I'll put that on the follow list. There we go. So then that brings me to the Humble Bundle and my Twitter feed, and we actually got everything done today. So of course I could always go back and play for for more gems. Well, I can't always do that. And weird when they decide to reset these daily rewards. It's weird that it makes you go back to the screen when it decides it wants you to go back to the screen to get the daily login rewards, instead of either having a pop-up that can be very quickly X'd out if you're in the menu, or just not doing anything. And see, everything rotated over, so theoretically off screen, if I have nothing better to do, I could play that and try and get some more rewards. But I doubt I will do that. I've definitely got better things to do. So looking at the Humble Bundle store, let's see, there's an Explore and Expand Games Bundle, and that's it. There's actually quite a lot of book bundles. Black Friday sale also apparently still going on. So let's see, the Explore and Expand bundle is Holycron 6 Lightspeed Edition, Reign of Reflections, Sins of a Solar Empire Trinity. If you go over the average, you get Starpoint, Galactic Civilizations 3, and the Crusade expansion, Starpoint Gemini Warlords, and then also Galactic Civilization 3 Retribution expansion and Mega Events DLC. And if you spend $10 or more, you get Stellaris Galaxy Edition. So a lot of space games, and I've never been a major fan of space games, so those are easy to ignore. Actually, I've been fairly easy as far as trying to not overspend. There was like one Lego set that I would have liked to have gotten, but I decided against it. Just because I'd already bought a lot of Lego already. But otherwise, there's severely not that much over Black Friday and Cyber Monday. In fact, so much that I had kind of forgotten that Amazon even had Cyber Monday lightning deals and things like that, and I didn't even look at them. I went to Amazon.com to look for something else, and I saw that it happened to be on the lightning deal and purchased it, but otherwise I didn't even bother to I didn't even bother to get it to look for other sales. Borderlands 3 tweeted out that you can still grab Borderlands 2 Command of Lilith and the Fight for Sanctuary for the Nintendo Switch for free until December 3rd. See, we'll open up some more links. And Kratos apparently is coming to Fortnite. Let's see. Do we have anything else? I'm definitely starting to get antsy. Phantasy Star Online 2 Episode 6 launches December 9th in the West. Yeah, I'm starting to get very, very painful to sit in this chair. And I really can only stay seated for maybe 3 hours, maybe 4 hours before the chair starts getting very flat and uncomfortable. And I definitely have had jobs that well, I don't think legally they can make you sit in a chair for more than 5 hours straight. Definitely tried to go that far. I don't know where the legal ease goes down now as far as being required to give a 15-minute break. There's all kinds of schemes and scams to get around giving 15-minute breaks, and frankly, a 15-minute break would not help me much. Standing up and then sitting back down after 15 minutes is not changing the scenario. Yeah, I definitely in one job was basically chained to a desk, figuratively speaking, and it was like you never could leave the desk, and it was 8 plus a couple more hours often. It was often 10 or more hours of working a day. Metro has an article, apparently Smash.gg has been acquired by Microsoft as an esports platform. Let's see. Which Microsoft has been acquiring things in an esports platform. Might help Microsoft, but there's a real question as to what in the world are they going to do with it, since they already blew Mixer as a concept. So yeah, maybe they'll just have an esports team in general, or esports platform in general, to try and integrate it better into the Xbox Series X. Alright, well, that's going to be it for the stream, and at some point we ran into a little bit of network trouble and I dropped 1.1% of frames, but that's it. So everything else worked. I'm very happy with whatever I undid that messed up the quality of service so much. Alright, well, that's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.